Mark,
Hey, Paul.
what's going on? What are you reading?
I'm reading my recalled error variant of Night Terrors #1.
Wow. Why is it recalled?
Apparently, they forgot to put the green on it.
You know,
It doesn't have
in,
red
in
on it either.
in the DC universe, you cannot do anything without the green,
You gotta have the green.
right? Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
So Swamp Thing says.
They put it on the back, though. That's the ironic part.
Exactly. Um, but there's actually a whole comic book that goes along with that, and we'll talk about that right after this. So, welcome back to another edition of DC Comics Deep Dive. Before we get started, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you're alerted whenever we upload new content. Hit the like button. Actually, hit the like button, and leave a comment too, because at the end of all of these, we will be doing a special live edition of DC Comics Deep Dive. We will be giving away the entire Deep Dive saga. We will basically be first picking one of the videos. We don't know exactly which one yet. It'll happen by random, and from that video, we will pick a comment that was put on that particular video. So make sure you leave a comment to be entered in to win the drawing for the entire deep dive story. So we are now in week 2. We're in week 2 of Night Terrors, which is kind of funny because we're actually in week 1, or the issue number 1 of the Night Terrors proper series, which really is, for all intents and purposes, Night Terror number 2.
Yeah, they really had to make it confusing.
Exactly. DC Comics like to do these bookend things like an Alpha and Omega, whatever. This time they're doing First Blood and Night's End instead, at the beginning and the end, and then they're doing 4 issues in the middle with the Night Terrors proper. But this is the Night Terrors number 1 proper, which is Joshua Williamson, again, leading the way. A lot of dead man in this one. A lot of dead man again. So
Yeah, it was pretty solid. I gotta be honest with you. I'm definitely eating crow on the event as a whole. And this main body, the main event book is really mostly responsible for that. It's super solid. Like you said, a lot of dead man. It opens up with us getting like a retelling of his origins, a little synopsis of it. And they do it in a smooth way for new readers to kind of get introduced to the idea of as a daredevil in the circus and what he really longed for, the reaction he went for, and how it was no surprise when he actually died to him and the crowd's reaction. It kind of set the stage for him to be our guide through this book. And this was a very important book because we dive into everything that we didn't know about our villain.
yeah, it really is. And like you said, to start, I mean, he talks about basically, he talks about himself and how when he was performing and everything, it wasn't the cheers or the applause that really was important. It was the gasps, you know. And in order for it to actually really kind of be to its fullest, he had to also gasp as well. So he had to believe that he could be dying at any second as well, in order for it to be to his for his show to really, connect to its fullest.
And then he did.
And then he did.
But
Exactly.
as they always say, the show must go on.
Correct.
And it does
So
in
yeah,
this book, and it picks up right where we left off with Insomnia holding Batman. Batman, who is in fact asleep, being piloted by Boston Deadman himself. And this is where we get a lot of exposition. We get a lot of information on like the creatures that we're seeing in the real world are manifest nightmares brought to reality from this Insomnia character. He kind of gives us all this information that he is a god of nightmares and he must bring not only his worst fears to reality, but all the heroes and villains as well. And that's when Deadman decides to really get to the core of this. We really jump right into the whole Insomnia, who is he thing, and he dives into Insomnia's body. And that's where we get the big exposition dump on the Nightmare Stone itself. Now, they spoil who Insomnia is in this issue, but they kind of set the stage for the Dream Stone being a little more mysterious because it tells us, or the Nightmare Stone was created long ago by a sacrifice, a tormented hero, in a long lost case. And before it fell into Dr. Destiny's hands and was hidden in some of these nightmares. And when it says tormented hero, we do get an image of the Sandman, Wesley Dodds
right.
Sandman. So I feel like though we get the origin of Insomnia right off the bat, that maybe we're going to kind of blow past this character into more important matters with the actual stone itself.
Right, and so I am now going to retract what I said in the last episode that I thought it was Jericho or that it could be Jericho because they clearly state that Insomnia was in Arkham Asylum.
Yeah, he was just a random dude in Arkham
Right,
Asylum. This is what was teased at the end of the Lazarus Planet, where we see some of the Lazarus resin creeping down into just an inmate cell. He's no importance, no this or that really. He's just a random guy created by the Lazarus effect.
right. But we do have. I mean, it's interesting how we do have Boston Brand, Deadman, jumping into Insomnia, and what he sees when he's in there is a lot of really nice work done by Joshua and also Camicoli. I can't think of his last name now, but
Yeah,
Giuseppe.
there's a lot of artists on this one. We bounce
Yeah,
around between artists. But yeah, we know who he is. We still don't know why he hates the hero so much, but it does reinforce that he's not a fan of heroes, and that he views them as monsters. And one of his most suppressed memories, emotions, feelings is it looks like he's hiding something happy in his life. We see it looks like a family holding hands, smiling. That he's trying to keep that memory pushed down and just really focus on the heroes as monsters. And then about that time, Boston gets forced out of him where he recognizes and looks to him and says, "You're no god. You're just a man. You're just some dude." Yeah. So then we go back to the action-packed issue from there.
Right. So he jumps back into Batman, and then he jumps out of the building that he's in, and then we go back to we see Deadman then looking at some things. He sees Zatanna, who is one of the few people who is not asleep in this whole situation. But then we find that he ends up in a cemetery.
With
Um,
some of Batman's resin that he saved.
Correct, and he uses it. He basically pours it on the
Grave.
grave of Wesley Dodds, and we slowly see the hands, come through the everything, and then we get that final shot. Let me bring you up right here. Let me do that. Let me do that. Where we
Reanimated
find
Wesley Dodd.
Exactly, where we get the reanimated Wesley Dodd, who basically just says that he loves a good mystery, and so we says it's going to be continued in the Brave and the Bizarre, um, uh, and so I for one am thrilled to have Wesley Dodd back. Hopefully they'll find a way to
And in a
keep him alive.
new light that we haven't had him, like they didn't just bring the character back and pretend like he wasn't dead. They literally reanimated him and he is a corpse.
Right.
He's a zombie under there. So that I thought that was interesting and it's fitting for the story as well. This was a fast-paced issue, a lot of action sequences. It really served its purpose just to give us the information of who Insomnia wonder to speculate on it. I find a lot of enjoyment in not knowing and getting to talk about it with other readers and stuff. So I'm hoping that they really bring the Nightmare Stone's importance and mystery surrounding it to the forefront because I like Sandman, love a good mystery when I'm reading these things. I don't need.
Yeah, and like we said last time too, was we're pretty well assured that he's going to stick around for a little while because he does have a 6-issue miniseries coming out starting in October, so right after the end of this. So looking forward to that as well.
Oh yeah,
But that was just the beginning of our night terrors thing for the week because we got 5 other night terrors issues.
the tie-ins just keep on coming.
Exactly. And for the most part, I think they were actually pretty good again.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
I gotta say they definitely were decent. I feel like some are similar in nature, some are a little different, some have a little more weight than others, but for the most part, all entertaining.
right. So let's try. My favorite cover of the week had to be exactly hands down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hands down. That was insane. Perillo crushed this.
Exactly. And As we mentioned before, this is really kind of the only one that really kind of continues from their title proper,
Yeah,
as though
PSA here. Jeremy Adams, who's writing Green Lantern, wrote the Night Terror book when a lot of these are being written by step-in writers for the event. So that explains why it was the most seamless transition into it. If you're pulling Green Lantern, you need to pull the Night Terror books because it's just issue 3. It's not
right.
it's not separate. Then on top of that, I might as well start with the backup story. There is a backup story of Sinestro, and it's our first time diving into Sinestro in this new Green Lantern run. So our first real story explanation, anything of where, what, when Sinestro happens in Night Terrors.
Right, exactly. And so, to your point and to our point is this story picks up exactly at the point where Green Lantern number 2 ends. He's basically in the air, flying next to this plane, and it's not too long before when he tries to get into the plane, that he finds that he is suddenly in a dream, going back to his childhood and his father's funeral, which props to Jeremy Adams too. There is the fact that Hal Jordan has mixed parents, meaning one is Jewish and one is Catholic, is not something that is really kind of relatively ever mentioned at all. But Jeremy has done his homework, and so we see Hal Jordan wearing his yarmulke, and with his father's funeral, and of course, as happens in all good nightmares, his father suddenly crawls out of his coffin to say hello to Hal.
That was nice of him.
It was, wasn't it? Nice of you to come, Hal. Um, and then we go from that part of the dream where it's his father's funeral to basically the day that he became a Green Lantern. We find him at Ferris Aircraft in the simulator. And we find that suddenly his simulator is grabbed by this green energy wave and is brought to the side of a dying alien who happens, of course, to be Abin Sur. And so, but things go a little bit different than they went the first time here.
It puts a ring on Hal that's sucking the life force out of him and re-energizing, revitalizing Abin Sur while talking trash to him, where he has to willpower his way out of that, and his nightmare shifts to Oa.
Right. Where we again see the Guardians of the Universe, who in the real world are nowhere to be found, and they actually mention the United Federation of Planets here as well. And then we see them slowly start to turn grotesque, just like everyone else has in the dreams.
Yeah, they
And we
address
find
the quarantine as well.
correct. And we find that Hal is left to face his biggest fear, which is basically the avatar of fear that has plagued him since he returned in Rebirth, and that is Parallax.
Yeah, so the formatting of this was actually pretty interesting. I enjoyed it a lot. And if you're a new reader to Green Lantern, this was actually a very serviceable story in a sense that this was literally a retelling of his origin through Nightmare Lens. You had the death of his father as a child. You had Abin Sur finding him and giving him the ring. You had the introduction to the Guardians, and then you have the introduction of Parallax. It was literally an origin story, just kind of recapping. And I thought that was an interesting format. It was fun. It was solid. Sinestro was really no different. It was just highlighting a couple of the notable moments in his past, told through Nightmare Lens. And then, that was it. But it was done well. It was done really well.
Yeah, it really was. And then we go back, and then we have the backup story with Sinestro.
Mm-hmm.
Where we basically see Sinestro. Basically, we see him as he was in the beginning of the story. He was dressed this way on one of the variant covers of issue number 1, kind of wearing a hoodie, a zipped up hoodie, right?
Street level Sinestro.
Exactly, street level Sinestro. And so we see him basically arguing. We see him arguing with some dude on the street who basically is asking, what kind of freak are you? And he says, basically that he was at one point he was this great lantern. He ruled planets, and now he's nothing. Now he's just afraid. Um, and we then see these night terrors basically come and appear to him, and um, we find out that he ends up fighting a version of himself, um, dressed in his not in his Yellow Lantern costume, but the costume that he had originally, the blue. The blue and the gray costume, and he ends up fighting himself. But then he ends up fighting at the very end. He is faced with a three-eyed Sinestro in his Green Lantern costume that basically says, that he's going to defeat him, and he doesn't know who Hal Jordan is. That he's never seen anybody better than himself. So quick and easy. It wasn't my favorite of the two. Obviously, I like the Hal Jordan one better, but it was still pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Flash.
Yeah, this for me was my favorite one. This one had probably the most creative angle of Night Terror thing going in for it. And it also lends heavily to the character. Like they absolutely, whoever this writer was, Pat Nadell, knows this character. In my opinion, really understands some of like the concerns that Barry would have, because this is a Barry Allen focused story where we went from Wally being our primary Flash to Night Terrors with Barry being the focus of this. And in the beginning of this, we have Barry Allen kind of dialoguing on a conversation that he had with Iris about like what is it like to experience the Speed Force, to move at that kind of speed. And he explains it as if like you're dreaming and you really don't know necessarily the difference between awake and a dream, going from the Speed Force to the mundane pacing of normal life in his eyes. And that was a great way to set the stage for what comes next, because how he experienced the nightmare is unique to him as a speedster. He already establishes it's hard to discern one from the other, awake and dreaming at times. And that comes into play heavily as the nightmare starts unfolding, because in that nightmare, it kicks off with a bad phone call where Wally is mortally wounded from a fight with Gorilla Grodd. He was fighting him all on his own. Jay was attempting to get there, but was injured along the way and didn't get there quick enough. And Wally got impaled by Gorilla Grodd. Barry goes to visit him in the hospital and has a few words, and Wally describes like his speed was not working right. There was something in the Speed Force slowing him down. He then goes to the prison to talk to Gorilla Grodd, who was making light of the whole situation. Couldn't believe he actually got him. Didn't think it would happen. All I did was merely put the pole out in front of me, assuming that he was going to get out of the way, and next thing you know, he's stuck on it. The conversation goes bad. Barry beats the crap out of him. And then he goes on to try to explore some of the events of what's happening. And he starts out by going, I believe, to the Watchtower it was, where he encounters Hal Jordan, but not just any Hal Jordan, a completely disfigured, terrifying Hal Jordan because of the events of, what was it, Final Night?
Final Night.
Right. Yeah, where he's as Parallax absorbs all the
he
sun.
Reignited the sun and everything. Right, exactly. Yeah.
So and the fact that Barry has seen all this happening, the wounded Kid Flash, the Gorilla Grodd acting the way he is, the other inmates in the jail ripping their eyelids out, Hal Jordan in the state, and it's not registering yet. Where everyone else has the ability to just register the nightmare and move through it as a nightmare, Barry's just moving through this as a normal comic, a normal problem he has to solve. So he then pretty much fires up the cosmic treadmill with a little bit of help, and he tries to go back to the events of that fight and save Kid Flash, and he's not able to, and it keeps happening. So now he has to address what's in the Speed Force causing this to keep occurring. It was a really good issue. Artwork was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kudos to both the last two issues, Green Lantern and the Flash, because there are a lot of call-outs to DC history throughout these.
Yes.
And in Green Lantern, like I said, we have his parents, we have his actual origin, we have other things as well. Here we have a call out to the Spear of Destiny, which is what Grodd uses to steer Wally. But that's a call out to the JSA classified, but also a call out to the origin of the JSA. Part of the origin of the JSA had to do with Hitler trying to use the Spear of Destiny. We have the call out to Final Night. We have all of these different call outs to past DC history. And to your point, he constantly is trying to save Wally. He's constantly going back and back and back and back, and he's not able to. And then in the final scene, on the final page, Wally mentions that there's something called a monster in the lightning, and so that is what we get on the final page. What
The
what
Nightmare
monster in the
Wave
lightning
is inside the
exactly
Speed Force.
right. So just a great another great issue. So
Yeah, those are super solid.
yep. Okay, Robin.
Yeah, we can sum this one up quick.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, if you're a fan of Robin, if you're pulling Robin, yeah, great. But if you're not, you probably don't need this. It's Jason Todd, Tim Drake repeating. There was kind of like the Joker in a sense that they're just repeating some stuff that's clearly just done to death. Like they're both get pulled into the nightmare. They recognize that Tim Drake is reliving the day from Identity Crisis where Captain Boomerang kills his dad. He's just over and over trying to get into the bedroom quick enough to save him over and over. While you have Red Hood seeing a version of himself with a baseball bat for a head coming at him and him shooting him and killing it, and it makes more like whole Hydra, like kill one more pop up, and they just keep repeating this over and over, and that's the issue. That's it.
Oh, a baseball for a head. See, I took that as though it was the Red Hood.
I thought it was a baseball bat.
Could be. I took it as though
Red Hood makes a lot more sense
because he was the Red Hood originally, and so that was basically. That's the way I took it.
I'm probably right. It looked like a daggum baseball bat because how tall it was. That's definitely the Red Hood with a shark mouth. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Because he does make a little smart aleck remark about Jason Todd donning the identity of the Red Hood, but yeah, it was super tall, like the OG Red Hood. But yeah, that's what it was. It was just over and over.
Shazam!
Yeah. This one gets a little dark. This one gets actually really dark. We're killing kids in this book. We're not. I'm not. Paul's not. The writer of this book, Mark Waid, is. Mark Waid did a good job presenting the story. If you're reading and enjoying Shazam, you'll probably like it. Mary wakes up. Her normal everyday life kind of stuff is getting kind of a little weird. Some things that are showing signs of this isn't normal. She recognizes that she's in a situation. Billy Batson shows up looking zombified, black and whitish, looking almost like Black Adam. And then he pretty much gets his hands on Mary while he starts calling out the magic lightning and slaughtering the children of the Marvel family in front of her.
Exactly.
One at a time.
Exactly. Over and over and over again. And that's really
where we
that's where we end. She's basically restrained to something, and on the final page, he's kind of leaning in, whispering to her, saying the word again.
Yeah, he's just grabbing one of his siblings at a time, holding him.
Yeah,
Shazam, frying him.
Yeah,
Shazam. Like wow, that was savage. That was so savage.
This one, which I know you're not a big fan of backwards, but there was for a Zatanna title, there was very little.
Very little. And I feel like this was probably the most important book that came out today to service the main body of the story. As we pointed out in issue 1 of Night Terrors, they do actually recognize Zatanna as being awake and fighting against some of the stuff that's happening in the real world. That was, if you're an airplane pilot and you get forced to sleep, tragedies happening. If you're Superman and you're in mid-flight and you get forced to sleep, you're like a missile about to land somewhere. Red Tornado's been shutting down airplanes and stuff and doing what he can. Zatanna's one of the ones that is awake and doing it. She was left at the Hall of Justice with Wonder Woman and Detective Chimp with Dr. Destiny's other body when all of this happened. And she's pretty much ran down to a safe room in the Hall of Justice being chased by Night Terrors, which this is actually interesting. We get introduced to what looks like almost generals for Insomnia, like the Queen of Death and stuff like this that are chasing her. It looks like they have ranks and orders and not just mindless monsters that are trying to get to her. And she needs backup. So she calls upon a spell to bring her somebody that's awake as well. And none other than Robot Man shows up, which actually makes less than 0 sense. Because despite the fact that robots would still be awake, Robot Man is not a robot. It's a robot body with a human brain.
Right.
That
Red
thing has to
Tornado
be
makes
shut down.
sense, but not Robot Man.
No, but it was awesome to get Cliff there. They had great dialogue and banter between one another. There was a little bit of cool conflict at first, and then they come together like butt cheeks to make it down to the labyrinth that leads to the safe room, but not before Cliff gets gotten infected by one of the nightmarish generals following them, turning him into like a monstrous version of himself coming for Zatanna. So we were left with her awake down there trying to do what she can to help the situation as one of the few superpowers that are still awake. It was solid.
Yeah, actually, he becomes the rest bringer. Cool concept at the beginning, and I mean, I didn't even really think about the fact that any of the robot heroes would necessarily not be affected by this until I saw Red Tornado and they mentioned it. So kudos to him. But yeah, to your point, since sleeping is something that is designed to basically, give the mind some rest and the body. Obviously, the fact that Robot Man has a human brain should have meant that he would have been asleep as well. But this is actually written by the guy who was writing the Doom Patrol miniseries, Dennis Culver. So I'm not surprised that he used that
That
as well. But
explains it.
yeah, but yeah, another solid issue. Again, I thought all 5 issues to varying degrees, but they were all pretty solid again. So 2 weeks in, and I'm pretty happy with just about everything that I've been reading. The
Yeah, I still
miniseries
recommend that
is,
readers stick with the if you're not just doing what we do and pulling it all, like just stick to the characters you really enjoy at this point. Get the main body and just stick to characters you enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. Because obviously it is a pretty good financial commitment to get like 46 issues total for everything. So,
Yeah. Which again,
but
it's not
next week,
necessary, but man, there'd be a lot of upset people if they didn't service their favorite character. A lot of people love Robin. A lot of people love Zatanna. Like I love Zatanna, but
yeah,
stick to
exactly.
what you love, and you won't be let down.
hmm Next week, we'll see the first appearance of Superman in Night Terrors in his issue. So, and it's written by Joshua Williamson as well. So it should be, right in his
Super.
wheelhouse. So
Should be
exactly,
super. It's
exactly.
actually about Superman falling asleep while in mid-flight. That's what.
Right. There is no issue of Night Terrors proper next week. It is just the 5 tie-in issues, and then the following week we'll have Night Terrors #2. So it is just the 5 tie-in issues next week. So if you're just buying the main issues, you get a week off this week. But again, if you are collecting some of the other titles outside of Night Terrors, you can't do yourself wrong by also picking up
Next
these
week's going to
issues as
be
well.
the most painful week yet. We have so many that I'm not looking for. Punchline. We got to do Punchline next
Punchline.
week. Yay.
Yeah. Yay. Yeah. And then we have what is Angel Breaker is coming up. Is that next week as well, or is that the week
No,
after? I don't remember
that
exactly.
one's not next week. Next week we have Superman, Nightwing, Wonder Woman, Catwoman, Punchline. So I'm excited for Wonder Woman though. You got
Yeah.
the Justice League Dark in there with her beautiful Jay Lee cover on the A.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and Nightwing, I'm looking forward to Nightwing and Superman. So yeah, the other two, I'm not really necessarily looking all that forward to. So,
yeah,
but we will read them, so you don't have to.
that's what we're here for.
And we will let you know. But that's going to be it for this edition of DC Comics Deep Dive. Again, subscribe, like, hit the notification bell. Make sure you leave a comment so that you'll be entered, or you have a chance to win the entire Night Terrors saga, because we'll be doing that at the end. But that's going to be it. I am Paul. He
Is Mark, but
our Legion.
You're now leaving.
Sector 2815.
Never done
Wow.
it that way before. We
No,
nailed it.
exactly. Now we're doing half sentences. This is just going to be really bad. We'll have to
Yeah.
do like every other word.